Okay, Kia koto, ko mai Park Zaha. I'm the Assistant Manager of the Careers and Employment team here at Te Heranga Victoria University of Wellington, and welcome to Graduate Recruitment 101, a webinar brought to you by the NZUni Talent Jobs Board, the jobs board with student and graduate opportunities from top employers all in one place. The platform shared by all 8 New Zealand universities gives students and recent graduates the chance to search, consider and connect with hundreds of different types of opportunities from a range of employers and industries in New Zealand and beyond. So I just wanted to cover off a little bit of the agenda that we're going to be doing in the next 50 minutes. And it just occurs to me that I should probably set my timer going so I make sure that I don't go over too much. And before introducing my peers from the other unis who will be co-presenting with me today, I'd just like to give you a quick overview of the session, which, as I say, is being recorded. So please do note that if you unmute to ask a question, that will be captured by the recording. So we're going to start talking about graduate recruitment, get into some of the what's, whys and whens, as well as some terminology. And also we're going to look at the importance of reflection in identifying your strengths, targeting the right opportunities, and in personal branding. And we're also going to finish up by looking at the application process itself. So some tips and tricks, the real nuts and bolts of what the process can look like, as well as how to navigate it. So if we could go on to the next slide, please, Sander. So you know who I am. I'm the Assistant Manager of the Careers team here at Te Heranga Victoria University of Wellington. I've worked at the university for 6 years, and I am a geek for all things careers. I'm also joined by Julia Mallet, a Careers Advisor at Lincoln University. And Julia came into the role of Careers Advisor at Lincoln following a varied background in the media, banking and disability sectors, primarily in HR support and job readiness. Bringing an honours degree in psychology and political science, Julia has a huge passion for people and understanding what motivates and excites them. Julia brings this to her role at Lincoln and loves working with students, recent grads and employers to create connections, bring great opportunities to campus and support individuals in all aspects of their career preparedness. Also from Lincoln, we have Michelle Ash, who has worked in the Lincoln University Career Centre for much of her career and feels privileged to work with students, recent grads and employers. Michelle's background has included working in New Zealand and the UK with job seekers and employers, as well as in human resources, training and development, and more recently in governance roles in the tertiary sector. And last but not least, we are joined by careers consultant Nell Mooney from University of Canterbury. Nell's career began when she was a teenager as a part-time employee at the local supermarket in Blenheim. And prior to working at UC, where she has been for 7 years, Nell worked in a variety of industries, including HR, health and safety, insurance, real estate, healthcare, and engineering. Nell says the favorite part of her job is meeting people from all over the world and hearing their stories. So hopefully you'll get to hear some of our stories and some stories from some of our students that we will share with you as well. A little bit of context for why we are doing this collectively across the universities. It's a very unusual collegial relationship that we have here in New Zealand, what with there only being the 8 universities, as opposed to, gosh, I think the 40 odd that there are in Australia. It means that we are able to collaborate on any number of things that benefit students across all of New Zealand and beyond. And central to that relationship is the NZUni Talent Jobs Board. Now, there are a truly bewildering amount of jobs boards and platforms out there for you to have a look at, and we advise that you look at all of them, whether that be Seek, Prosball, TradeMe. There are so many of these places that you can go, but we would strongly suggest that you include the NZUni Talent Jobs Board, which is owned across the universities. And the reasons for this is that on your local jobs board, which you'll see with this branding, it may look like this, or might look a little bit different. This is the one here at Te Heranga. But one of the benefits of this jobs board is that these roles are specifically for you. So these aren't roles that we have gone out and scraped from Seek or from TradeMe. These are organizations that have reached out specifically and said, hey, we would like to target students from Canterbury, or we would like to target students from Victoria University of Wellington, because we have opportunities that very specifically relate to their study areas as well. So there is that added value there. And also these are organizations, that to one degree or another, we have relationships within the careers and employment teams across all of the universities. So that means that there's a lot of scaffolding built around you if you were to apply for any of these opportunities. There are the central career services that you can access to go in and say, hey, I'm applying for this graduate role with John Smith's consulting firm. It was on your jobs board. Do you have any connections within that organization? Do you have any insights into the practices that they have? So do keep that in mind when you hopefully include NZUni Talent within the suite of options that you have for looking at the roles that you want to apply for, as whether they be internships, graduate programs, jobs, or just good old-fashioned jobs. Okay, so what is graduate recruitment? We talk about this a lot. The first year, if there's any first-year students here, you're going to be thinking about this next year because of internships. Penultimate year or students in their last but 1 year of study, you're going to be thinking about this already, and you're going to be thinking about it probably even more next year because you might be graduating then and you might want to get onto a graduate program. So what you're going to see is you're going to come back after the Christmas break and all this stuff's going to be happening on campus. There's going to be all of these jobs and programs advertised. There's going to be all of these careers expos and employers coming on campus and opportunities to engage and meet people and apply for things. So what does it all mean? Why is it all happening then? What is a graduate program? What is an internship? What we'd like to do in this session, amongst other things, and what I'd like to do in the 5 minutes that I have remaining before I pass you over to one of my colleagues, is do what I call play the hits. You know, we're going to play the hit singles. For those of you that maybe don't access your career service, which again, we strongly encourage you to do, I want to make sure that you walk away with at least a rudimentary understanding of what we're talking about. So when you do go and meet employers and you go to expos, you can talk the talk, you can speak the language. So you hear all these things, internships, graduate programs. Now, I'm going to make a big disclaimer here, and this disclaimer applies to the whole session. We are going to deal in massive generalizations throughout the whole of this session. The reason being is we've got 50 minutes and it's a huge subject. So in order for us to be able to give you anything useful whatsoever, we do have to generalize. So all of this stuff I'm about to cover off with definitions really applies to those large organizations, you know, whether that be in the public sector, your Big Four, your KPMG, EY, Deloitte, PwC, or in the public sector, your ministries, you know, MB, Ministry of Business, MSD. So people who have large programs, who take on a lot of students and a lot of grads and a lot of interns, obviously it's worth their while to come on campus and meet you and do all of these things. People who are hiring just 1 or 2 students may not do that. They may not see that it's worth their while as much. So what we want to be really clear about is if you don't get an internship or a graduate program, it is not the end of the world. Most students don't. But because a large number of students, not proportionally, but a large number of students do get on internships and graduate programs, we do all this stuff on campus. So what we don't want you to think is that you're in any way a failure if you don't. The majority of students, it's not a neat path into where you're going to. So I wanted to just, I guess, get that out of the way here at the beginning and say that a lot of the things, a lot of the broad generalizations we're going to be making around definitions and timings really apply to those larger organizations that hire a lot of students at once. But there's a lot more out there. And if you are interested in organizations that are smaller, reach out to your careers team because they could maybe help you connect directly with them. So definitions, what's an internship? Generally, you're going to hear that word quite a lot. Internships are marketed towards students who are in their penultimate year of study. That's their last but 1 year of study. The internships that you see advertised on the NZUni Talent jobs board will nearly always be paid. And generally, they'll be done over the summer between the end of your last but 1 year and you coming back at the beginning of your final year. So often they'll run from November to like the end of February, where you'll come back and you'll start your final year. And often internships will have some kind of mentorship element. It might be a particular part of the business. It might be a pipeline. So often what happens is you will finish your internship, and then the understanding is you'll go back, do your final year, and then you'll have potentially have the option of coming back and working for that organization either as a grad in just a graduate job or just a job, or on a graduate program, which neatly dovetails into graduate programs. Graduate programs and graduate jobs are not the same thing. Generally, that word again, graduate programs are aimed towards final year students, and they will come and start that when they finish, usually after the summer. They give you the summer off so they can have the interns there and look after them. And then when they go back, you'll start. And sometimes they're finite. Sometimes a graduate program will just be a year or 18 months. And at the end, you'll shake hands and you'll get on with your life and they'll get on with theirs. Often, though, they can dovetail into being a permanent role. And again, they often feature mentorship and support, and you might go on rotations in different areas of the business. Some graduate programs are pipelined from internships, but some aren't. And not all internships lead into graduate programs. So it's important to understand and ask those questions when you interact with these organizations about what shape or size your one falls into. And graduate jobs are just exactly what they sound like. They're jobs where you have to have been to university to do the job, or there's an expectation that you have. So they're the large definitions. I've got one last slide before passing you on. If you could just move on to that for me, please, Sander. I want to give you a sense of why stuff happens when it does. There's certain times of the year where there's just loads of stuff happening. March Madness, we call it. And what you'll see here is, this is actually, I'm going to be honest with you, it's a few years old, this data, but I can tell you now this has not significantly changed. So what you'll see here is the number of rounds that organizations do, the amount of times that these predominantly larger organizations go to market. Most of them do one round, but should very closely followed by those who do two. The when of it, you'll notice, is overwhelmingly January, February, March, 58%. And I'll tell you now, that's March. And then we see a little spike in July. The reason for this is March is when the large private organizations, so your consulting firms, for example, your commercial law firms, they all go to market then. A lot of reasons for that, won't get into it here, but a lot of that happens then, and that's why you get that big spike and you get the careers exposed and you get employers coming on campus. July, that's when the public sector wakes up. Now, this year obviously has been a very challenging, different year in the public sector, but on a normal year, that's when a lot of that recruitment happens. And also, those people who go to market in March often come round again and do another round in July. That's not to say that if you don't secure something during the March and July rounds, that is catastrophic, but you will see a lot of noise and a lot of things to apply for and a lot of activities to engage in during those periods for that reason. I'm going to pass you on now over to Julia and Michelle from Lincoln. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Kia ora, everybody. Just in the context of what Mike has just told you about graduate recruitment, obviously this time of year, about a third of vacancies are coming through, so it's a really busy time. So what Julia and I are going to do initially is just tell you a little bit from our experience working both with students and with employers, the sorts of things that we see really, really often, and this might resonate with some of you or it may not be your situation, but mostly what we see when we're working with students is that many students are not prepared for job searching and for applying for opportunities. And in the context of what Mike said with all of those busy times and the dates, you can see that if you are forearmed and ready, then you have an advantage. We know that many students find it really difficult to really say who they are, what they're good at, where they're heading, and why they're going in that direction. They don't really find it easy to talk about what value they can add and the skills that they've really honed and their strengths that are core to them. Most of them don't set aside time to pop into a career centre on campus or to reflect on who they are or where they're heading. And so often when they come and see us, it's because they're reacting to maybe having met an employer or they've seen a vacancy. So they're then coming and seeing us when they've got limited time to do their best work. Many focus on, I want to apply for this role, but they don't really think about why they want that role or why it might be a good fit. And so they then find it really difficult to articulate why they should be considered for that role. And we also see a lot of people that have very either fixed ideas about what they want to do or what their qualification might do for them, or they've got a very narrow view, so they don't think broadly. And it's really important in a market like what we have now, which is a really tight labour market, that you think about your ability to transfer your skills. So you might have an idea that maybe was there when you started your qualification, but the market's not delivering that opportunity now. So you need to think, well, how can I transfer my skills? What is the market delivering? And how can I take what I've got to there? And many of them just explore opportunities in an ad hoc way. So what we're saying is, if you don't do a good job of saying what you're good at, the recruiter is not going to know. And it really is your job to make the recruiter's job easy. We also wanted to highlight a little bit about what employers tell us or what recruiters tell us. And this may be a surprise, but primarily they're looking for a good fit and a good attitude, not just your ability to technically do a job or have the aptitude to pick it up quickly. And it's really important to understand that, because most selection processes are looking for a range of skills. And Julia will talk more about that shortly, about those sort of soft and hard skills that you need. Attitude is everything. So you may, recall someone that you know who got an amazing job and you think, gosh, I wonder why they got it, over someone else. maybe they were really keen, they were really enthusiastic, maybe they'd done their homework and they really researched that organisation and they spoke to people that worked there, and they actually made efforts to be in a position to really promote themselves in a really informed way. Most people that get roles are the ones that show that they really want it and that they've made efforts to be in that position. And fit really is all about doing a lot of thinking prior. Am I a good fit for this position? Is the role going to align with my skills and my strengths? The recruiter is going to be thinking, oh, is this person going to fit into this team? Are they going to complement the skills that I've got? Is this person going to really, work in the culture that we have in this organisation? Are your values the same as the values of this organisation? Are we going to be aligned and on the same page? You may know people that have gone into a role and then felt that the values fit wasn't there and actually made a decision to move on. So spending time thinking about what recruiters want is really, really important to being prepared. And we just wanted to now talk, or I'll introduce and Julie will continue, about the importance of reflection, taking that time to actually have a really good think about who you are, what you've got to offer, and how you're going to get where you want to go. So really understanding what your unique value is, what distinguishes you from other people. And if you're having trouble working that out, your careers advisors are here to help you. People that know you well, your friends and family, they're going to help you as well. You really need to have confidence, not only to identify these things, but to be able to articulate them at every stage of a recruitment and a selection process, right through to interviews or assessment centres. And if you really know who you are, then you're going to be able to target roles effectively. You are not going to be wasting your time. You're going to be making good decisions and then crafting applications that are tailored and do the job for you. And you'll be building a brand, and you'll be able to reflect that on your LinkedIn and through your CV and through every interaction that you have.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you very much, Sandra. Also, just wanted to, just for a couple of moments before we pass over to our colleague Nell, just talk about identifying your unique value a little bit more. And really the key takeaway on this one from us today is the stones that you don't want to leave unturned when you're applying for roles. That we see so many students who really focus in on their qualification and their very specific, what they see as their only relevant experience, and only highlight that on CVs and cover letters and in interviews. Whereas we would say that that's only a small part of what you bring to a role, as Michelle was just talking about. It's the abilities and competencies that you've built throughout your entire life on a range of different fronts that you really want to be highlighting at every opportunity. So that employers understand that technical ability and then shutting the door on everything else you bring. If you can understand this about yourself and really highlight it, they get a much broader picture of what you're able to offer to the company. I always say to students, that the employer isn't just going to make an assumption about you. You need to tell them what to think, or else what if they don't bother making an assumption? What if they don't bother thinking through that next step and what those things mean for you? So the way to stand out in a competitive job market is to highlight your skills. Next slide, please. Thank you. And just really a reminder of that difference between hard skills and soft skills. The hard skills we really see as being those technical strengths, technical abilities, that real practical knowledge or practical skill that you bring. That is super important. But the soft skills being those more subjective, really transferable people skills. If your ability to operate in a really fast-paced restaurant environment probably means you can handle pressure in that computing job later down the track. That's kind of what we're talking about. And we would just say that both of those carry an equal weighting and should be evident at every stage of an application process. That's communication, decision-making, all that stuff. As an example, this is an area we see really underplayed very, very frequently, hobbies and interests. We see students that are just fantastic on the sports field, or they've done some really cool travel opportunities. They've been really active in some club on campus, organising fundraising activities or a Black Thursday event or something really, really cool. And look at all the skills on this list that have been gained from those things. they are legitimate. Employers recognise them, they value them, and we see this all the time. People not highlighting this, and I'll be 3 appointments deep with a student and find out that actually they've done something absolutely fantastic. That I'm thinking, why on earth was this not on the top section of your CV? So this is the kind of thing that your friendly careers advisor, careers consultant can help you with at every stage. And so come and see us early and often, because we will try and pull this out and make sure that you're highlighting those extra bits and pieces that maybe you think are irrelevant. As a very last quick example, a way to do this is in perhaps an experience section. You might think that it's not relevant experience. Maybe it's a waiter, your hospitality job, and you think that's not got anything to do with anything. But if you talk about the thing you did as a task, but in the context using action verbs like these on the list here, it can really show how you performed that task. So it might be customer service, and you might put customer service with a bullet point on your CV, but it could be that you engaged positively with all customers, working quickly and effectively to resolve their complaints. You know, that how did you do that thing can mean just as much, and it's a really cool way to weave through those soft skills. Just if you're getting a bit stuck, now we'll go into it a bit more detail shortly, but if you're getting a bit stuck, a good list of action verbs can be a really nice way to get those wheels turning. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so our recommendation would be to work hard from the get-go to build a skills and strengths database. It could be in Google Sheets or Excel, or it could just be a list, but a literal database of everything that you think you bring to the party with some evidence attached to it. If you do that early, when it comes time to making that application later down the track, you've already got it there. You've got a fantastic database of what you bring, and you've got the confidence to put it into those documents, and you're not scrambling to do it the night before an application is due. That'll be our big takeaway today on the reflection front. Thanks very much.
So yeah, kia ora koutou. Great to have you all here. I'm going to now talk through the typical application process. I just want to come back to what Mike said at the beginning of the session, the big disclaimer that, you know, we're generalising. So this application process, these stages that you're seeing on your screen at the moment, this refers to the typical application process for grad jobs, grad programs, internships, and some grad jobs. But not all employers will use every step of this process. Some employers might combine different steps. They might do them in different orders. So there's lots of variety in the way the application process can go. But I just thought I'll briefly explain each step, hopefully sort of whet your appetite a little bit so that motivates you to go to your careers team and find out a little bit more. So Michelle and Julia have talked about the importance of research. Can you just jump to the next slide, please, Sunda? Thank you. And they've been talking about it from the perspective of reflecting upon yourself, which is, you know, a form of research, understanding yourself, knowing your values, your skills, your strengths, all of these things that really make you tick. I'm now coming at it from the perspective of researching the employer. So this is really important because it's the other sort of side of the coin that helps you understand the specifics of a role, that allows you to then tailor your CV and cover letter and potentially interview answers to what they're looking for and what you've got to offer aligned with that. The fit and alignment also means that you gain insight into the company and make sure that you're applying for a company and a job that is a good fit for you. Employers recognise when you've done that research, when you've done your homework, it's obvious. It becomes really obvious because you can speak a little bit like Mike mentioned earlier, when you can use the right language, when you can speak to projects they're working on or their client base, they know that that means you've done your research. So it demonstrates your enthusiasm. And that gives you a competitive edge because that also shows them that you have initiative and that you're going to be thorough and do the mahi you need to do in order to succeed. And then finally, it can help you inform your interview responses. So when they're asking questions in the interview, your research is really good prep for that, because now you can give responses that are relevant to what you know of the company and the role, and also relevant to yourself. And the avoiding mismatches, I kind of covered that a little bit earlier. Lots of methods here that you can use to research the company, but I think I'm just going to jump straight to the one about the LinkedIn alumni tool. If you're not familiar with that tool, again, pop along to talk to your careers people and they'll be able to share that with you. It's a really powerful tool to help you connect with people who might help you, who might be able to provide you with really meaningful information to help you make those well-informed decisions about which companies and jobs you're going to apply to.
If I could just jump in for a quick moment
Absolutely.
there, Nell.
Thanks, Mike.
Sorry, I noticed there was actually a question which we will get to at the end about postgrad students. I would point out that the recommendation that Nell just made about LinkedIn is a really useful tool for those who maybe feel that they don't neatly fit within the undergraduate cohort that may be looked at. So sorry to jump in, but it just felt very timely in regards to that question.
Thanks, Mike. The other one I want to point out here is news. I worked with a student recently who was going for an interview with WSP the next day, and I suggested, like, have you Googled them to see if they've been in the news? So we did that, and there was an article that described that WSP had just won a tender to clean up the waterways in Canada, and that article had just come out that day. I don't know if you know anyone who's on here is familiar with WSP, but they often talk about being quite passionate about sustainability. So here was a good example of them walking the talk. And now the student that I worked with could go into that interview and maybe talk about that news article, and the interview panel here in New Zealand will be really impressed that potentially this candidate knows more about what's going on with WSP than they do. News is my favourite thing. You can get so much information about a company if they've been in the news recently. Thanks, Sonda. So I'm going to jump into cover letters. Cover letters, you want your cover letter to complement your CV rather than duplicate it. So it's not about repeating information, but maybe giving a little bit more detail. You have your basic sections where you want to talk about a nice intro. You do need to tell, sort of make it clear why you're writing to somebody. Try to come up with something a little bit more creative than the standard, I saw your job advertised in, and therefore I'm submitting my application. If you read 100 cover letters, you'll get that 99% of the time. If you can talk a bit about why you, so what have you got to offer the company and the role, and also why you're specifically interested in that role and that company. There might be lots of companies doing the kind of work that you're applying for, so why this one? What is it about them that attracts you? Again, you're going to want to customize each of those cover letters to you and the job, and make sure that you're showing a good match between their criteria and what you've got to offer. You can go and see, again, your local careers team have got some great resources in their careers centre that will help you to write a cover letter that you're confident with. Your CV, you go through life and you hopefully get a passport, and that allows you to travel around the world. But your CV is kind of like your passport, but it allows you to travel throughout your career. The difference is, of course, between a passport and a CV. CV is a marketing document, but you're the thing that you're trying to present. That makes it sound really easy, right? Marketing something easy. No, it's not. It's hard. We get it. So again, go and talk to your careers team if you want help with this. But what I really love about a CV is, and thinking of it in terms of that marketing document, and coming back a little bit to what Julia was talking about around collating a list of strengths and skills and things that you're good at, is your CV can help you with that. So it's a really great professional development tool in terms of helping you create a record of success. You might call it an achievement log or a brag file, call it whatever you like, but start collecting all of those times where you have felt really proud of something you've done, and any time where someone's maybe given you some really good feedback. Collect all of that, save it in the same place, so that when it comes time to writing your CV, it becomes really easy. You've got it all there. Also, what that helps with is helps you to spot the gaps. So that on the flip side of the coin to your record of success, you might consider keeping an areas for development list. So if there's something you come across that you think, oh, I'd like to be be able to put that on my CV, but I can't yet. Look for ways to put it on your areas of development list, and then look for ways for how you're going to develop in that space. Hopefully over time, you'll be able to move that then to your success log. So here I'm just showing you the most common sections of a CV. I want to just talk, mostly going to talk about, personal details is pretty straightforward. There are certain things that might differ in New Zealand to other countries. So have a chat with your careers team if you're unsure about anything there. But I want to talk a little bit more about your education section. You don't have to list all of your courses in your education section. Many employers who are recruiting students and graduates will ask for a copy of your academic transcript. So you can often just get that from your, whatever your online university platform is called. At UC, it's called My UC, and students can go straight in there and get their academic transcript. If the employer requests an official transcript, then you might have to go down the official route of requesting one from the university, and that might cost around $40 or so to get the official one. You might still include courses that are specifically relevant to the job and what you want to say about yourself if that feels like the right thing to do. Your skills and attributes, so again, Julia and Michelle have talked a little bit about this. So hopefully you can come up with examples from your brag file or your success log or whatever you'd like to call it, that you can come up with examples of the skills and attributes you've found that are meaningful to the employer and the role through doing your research. With your experiences, again, reiterating what Julia talked about, your experiences are all experiences in your life. Experience is not just paid work experience, it also refers to unpaid experience. So what I mean by unpaid experience is all of those life admin things that we all have to do and nobody pays us for. There is also voluntary work. There is also your study. The study that you're doing is really meaningful experience because you're gaining relevant skills, knowledge and competencies that employers value. And training is another form of experience that you might think about, where you have demonstrated skills or competencies that employers might like. And the final one I would suggest is lived experience. We see so many students who have had personal experiences that have helped them to develop certain characteristics like resilience or courage or a passion for a certain thing. This interest has arisen because of something they experienced. So that lived experience can be really meaningful as well. Interests, don't just write running. Give it a little bit of context. I'm not someone who loves running, so if I just see running on a CV, I think, well, what's going on? Are you being chased? Why on earth would you be running? However, if you write, I like to run 3 times a week for 20 minutes to keep fit, I'm going to go, oh, that's cool, good for you. Or maybe you like running and you're training for your first marathon. I'm going to think, oh, that's really cool, good for you. It says a little bit more about you too as a person and gives us a little bit more insight into what your values might be, your personality, and how that might fit with the team that we're recruiting for. Referees, try to include a couple of referees, local referees if you can. Often what we see with recent graduates and students is, referees can be pretty tough if you haven't got any local work experience or if you haven't got any paid work experience yet. But remember what we've talked about in terms of your experience being from all areas of your life. So at the age and stage of your career, it is absolutely acceptable to look for referees from all areas of your life that can speak to how you behave in a work-based capacity. So that might be your tutors, it might even be fellow students you've worked with on a group project. It could be through some of those voluntary experiences, maybe through a sport you play or another hobby. So lots of ways that you can look for referees. So with application forms, pretty much everything I've talked about already with CVs and cover letters applies. There are some additional things to be mindful of with application forms. One is using a professional email address. Often we've, set up an email address when we were 12 that we thought was really funny. Now, as we start getting into our adult life, employers might not appreciate that so much. So it comes down to, again, that research you do about a company to understand how formal are they, how informal are they. Might they appreciate that email address that you set up when you were 12? If the answer is yes, by all means use it, but you might need to consider looking for a more professional option. Proofread. Proofreading is really important with your application forms and your CV and cover letter. If you say in any stage of your application, you say you've got high attention to detail, but you spell detail wrong, immediately that makes everything in your application come into question. Because if you say you've got high attention to detail but you're not demonstrating that, then all of a sudden everything else is a little bit like, well, how can we believe what else you're saying? So make sure that you proofread, and you need to do that kind of manually as well as using some of the technology that's available, because, for example, a spell checker won't pick up if you've written from instead of form, vice versa. When you're doing an application form, highly recommend typing out your answers in a Word doc first, and then thinking about it overnight, making sure that you're happy with the answers you've typed out, and then you can use the spell checker and copy and paste them into the application form when you're ready to submit. What this does is also gives you that time to reflect on your answers and make sure that they are showing the research you've done and the reflection you've done upon yourself, but also it gives you a copy to save. So on that, make sure you're keeping a copy of everything throughout the application process, from the job ad, the position description, the CV you're submitting, the cover letter, everything. Keep a copy of it for yourself. And ChatGPT, we're having lots of conversations about ChatGPT these days, and I know there are some environments where it's really frowned upon. But if you are using ChatGPT wisely and ethically, then there is no problem with using it. Employers don't want to see generic cover letters and CVs that you've had ChatGPT write for you. So make sure that you're using quality prompts with ChatGPT, and I would even suggest you write your cover letter and your CV and then maybe get ChatGPT to check it for you. So again, if you need some help with learning how to write quality prompts for ChatGPT, go and talk to your careers team. You're a savvy bunch. You can learn this stuff through self-directed learning online as well. So don't be afraid to try that out either. Thanks. On the next slide, please. Thank you. For video interviews, still dress like it's a face-to-face interview and be prepared to just behave in general like it's a face-to-face interview. This is even harder if it's a one-way video interview, which is quite common in one of those recruitment steps for lots of employers who recruit students and graduates. Again, talk to your careers team. We can go into much more detail with you around how to succeed and how to build your confidence for these things. But if you dress like it's a face-to-face interview, that's going to put you in the right mindset to help you perform at your best for the interview. It also shows the interviewer that you're enthusiastic, you're keen enough to make the effort to present yourself well. Check your tech nice and early before the interview, so make sure that you've updated the latest version of Zoom or whatever it might be that they're using. Make sure that your speakers work, your microphone, all of that sort of stuff. Make sure things are working. You might need to find a quiet place where there are no distractions, you've got a good Wi-Fi connection, so that you don't have to be sitting in your bedroom with your bed behind you. Many of the universities have spots on campus where you can book to use for things like this. So again, check in with your careers team and see if they have those offerings. Imagine you're talking to someone that you know, so that forces you to kind of be natural and smile a little bit. It's a little bit hard for me to show you with my blurred screen, but what you can't see at the moment is I have 3 beautiful border collies at home, and I have their pictures up behind the camera because they're cute and they make me smile. And they also remind me to look into the camera so that for you, you feel like you're getting that eye contact. So there's lots of tips and tricks that you can do to help yourself feel more natural on camera. Speak clearly, do a better job of using those, minimizing those fillers like than I'm doing right now. And be mindful of your nonverbal cues. So there's some really good information on a website called Cultural Atlas that talks about the amount of eye contact that we use in New Zealand culture. Of course, there is a disclaimer around that it might be different for some Māori and Pasifika peoples. So the easiest thing to do with your nonverbal cues is, record yourself prior to talking into a camera so you can get a sense of how you're coming across, and whether you wave your arms around too much or you're not smiling enough, all of those sorts of things. And then pay attention on the day to the interview panel and mirror their nonverbal cues. If you do feel like you've stuffed up a little bit, you've lost your stride, just take a breath. It's okay to take a minute, take a sip of water, give yourself a second to catch your breath, and give yourself a little mini pep talk to keep going. Psychometric tests, if you're not familiar with them, they are just assessments that measure your sort of problem solving, logical reasoning, those sorts of things. Those are the aptitude tests. There's also these personality assessments which measure or identify your personal behaviours. So technical tests evaluate kind of more job-specific skills. And there's also these sort of game-based assessments. I've started to see students who are going for positions at companies like, I've seen BNZ and Shell, where they have done game-based assessments rather than the traditional assessments, the aptitude tests, those sorts of things. So these are the sorts of things that, the funny little brain games that you get on your phone, that's what the game-based assessments look like. So that can be a good way to practice for those game-based assessments if you're a bit unsure about those. Again, I found a recording of a game-based assessment that someone went through for Shell. Shell's a petrol company, went through for them, and they recorded the whole thing and put it on YouTube. So go and have a look and get a bit of a feel for yourself about what those game-based assessments might be. Similarly with the aptitude tests, personality assessments, etc. Each of the university career centres have their own versions of practice tests that you can jump on and have a go at. That is the best way to help you prepare. Practice, practice, practice. The hardest thing I think we find with these psychometric assessments is sometimes the wording trips us up. It asks a question, but you can be quite confused about what it's actually asking. So by practicing, you sort of start to get a feel for how they structure their questions, so you can be more confident about how to answer. Try to stay calm. That sounds really easy in theory, but try to stay calm when you're doing these psychometric tests. They're not a test, right? They're more of an assessment just to provide information about you. There's no right or wrong answer on your personality assessment. You are who you are. There are right or wrong answers with the aptitude tests, and sometimes they are timed. So try to work in the most efficient way possible, and that might mean checking with the assessors to ask if they are negatively scored, for example. So if you answer a question wrong, is it going to take off from your score, or is it just not going to count it? Find that stuff out so that you can play the game, knowing the rules. So an assessment centre might include some of the things we've already talked about. So you might go to an assessment centre and you might do psychometric tests during that period of time. You might also have interviews during that. But there are also other typical activities that you can expect to encounter at an assessment centre, and these might be group exercises, case studies, role-playing, and presentations. They're some of the most kind of common ones we hear about. Employers are looking for demonstration of your teamwork, leadership, communication, problem-solving skills, all of those things that employers typically look for. But as you're probably getting a feel for already, teamwork, there's lots of sort of micro skills that sit under teamwork skills. Similarly, lots of micro skills to leadership skills, and same for communication, problem solving, etc. So they've heard from you how you perceive your teamwork and leadership skills to be. Now they're looking at it in practice to see what that might look like in context with other people in the room. So to prepare well for an assessment centre, make sure you bring the things you need. So if you wear glasses, don't forget your glasses. I would highly recommend wearing a watch, because sometimes for an assessment centre, they might ask you to leave your phone outside the room. And if you're not wearing a watch, now you've got nothing to tell the time when they come in and say, right, this is what's happening next, you've got 10 minutes. So wear a watch and arrive nice and early for an assessment centre. So I would imagine that to be around about 15 to 20 minutes early, slightly earlier than you would for a job interview. The reason for this is that you give yourself extra time before an assessment centre to make the most of, you know, the coffee and tea and things they might have made available, but also to just chat with everybody and get comfortable in the space. So that can help you relax a little bit. During the assessment centre, be yourself. They're trying to get to know you. This is the case right throughout the recruitment process. Employers genuinely want to get to know you. So don't feel like you've got to tell them what they want to hear. That stuff will become obvious as you go through the recruitment process, when they can see for themselves that maybe you're contradicting, your behaviour is contradicting what you've said about yourself. So be authentic and be yourself. If you stumble in the first activity, don't give up, right? Someone else might find the next activity a little bit harder, and you might find that one a bit easier. It comes down to the assessors will be paying attention to how well you can recover if your nerves have got the better of you. And this happens to the best of us. Also, really take the opportunity to enjoy it. An assessment centre is, again, a really great opportunity for professional development. They're expensive and they're timely, so at someone else's expense, you're getting an opportunity to go and learn with a bunch of people, work with a bunch of people that you can learn from. They might have different perspectives and approaches that you could take back and add to your kete, to your success log, for you to use and try out next time. After the assessment centre, absolutely fair to expect feedback, either the same day or the next day. If they don't offer that initially, by all means follow up and ask for it. They should be able to give you something constructive, having observed you during an assessment centre and a variety of activities. But do your own self-review as well, because you want to think about how was the experience for you? Right, again, this comes back to the importance of your self-reflection, and your assessment centre is another way for you to do a bit more research about the company. So how did they make you feel? Did they provide an environment where you feel you could succeed and thrive? Or did they put on a bit too much pressure and make it seem like their expectations might be unreasonably high? So reflect on those things, because you might be made an offer, and if you are, congratulations, that's fantastic, but you don't have to accept. Don't feel obliged to accept. You might choose, based on your experience at the assessment centre and throughout the rest of the recruitment process, you might decide that it's not the right opportunity for you. Thanks, Sonda. So my final slide, I think, is interviews, just your regular old-fashioned face-to-face interviews. Now, I say old-fashioned, they're not actually old-fashioned. They're much more modern these days. Once upon a time, interviews were really pressured. It was the style of interviewers to be quite stoic, have a real poker face, and not let on how they're perceiving you or how they're responding to the answers to their questions. These days, again, interviewers want to get to know you. So good interviewers these days will be doing their best to make you feel at ease so that you can be your best self. And again, they want to be their best selves too. So again, it's another opportunity for you to assess the company and add any information you're getting to your research. Interviews can be structured, so they might have a bit of an intro where they do the small talk, and then ask some star-based questions, some behavioural-based questions. They might be unstructured, so you might meet in a cafe, or you might have like a coffee meet-up with the team to just meet each other and get a feel for whether you're going to be a good fit with the team. There can also be technical interviews where they might ask you to demonstrate your technical skills that might be required for the job. So again, we talk about body language. Similarly with those video interviews, pay attention to your verbal and non-verbal cues. Non-verbal communication is really high. So do that research. There's the cultural atlas, there's your local careers team. Go and find out what the sort of percentages are of how people communicate and perceive each other through verbal versus non-verbal cues, and be mindful of your own non-verbal cues. There are 3 common categories that interview questions fall under, and these are: who are you, what can you do for us, and why us? So if you ever presented with a question that leaves you going, oh, I'm not sure about this one, have a think about those 3 categories. Who am I? Why them? Why me? And have a think about what might they really be asking. You can also just ask them to repeat the question. It's absolutely okay to let them know, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. And then in the closing of the interview, they will ask if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask. So make sure you prepare questions. I think it's quite good to go in with a fairly big list, but be prepared to only ask, 3 or 4 questions. It's not going to be a whole nother reverse interview, but definitely have questions to ask, and have some questions up your sleeve that you could ask that might be a bit off the wall. So for example, I've heard employers asking candidates, what was your favourite toy as a child? So be prepared with some questions like that. Remember those 3 categories. Have a think about which category you think that might fall under. So you can use that question back at them. You can ask them tons and tons of questions, but the risk is if you don't prepare enough, they might answer all of your questions throughout the interview process, and you're left at the end going, oh, sorry, you've answered all my questions. So have a couple of kind of out-of-the-box questions that you could ask them. Always thank the interviewers for their time directly out at the end of the interview, and then highly recommend emailing them either later that day or the next day as well. This is kind of like if this is going to be a bit of a weird analogy, but stick with me. If you go on a date with somebody and you have the opportunity to go, oh yeah, I didn't mind that, let's do that again, or hey, it wasn't for me, I'm going to move on, thanks for your time. It's the same concept, right? If you've been to a job interview, let the interviewers know whether you're still interested in the job, and then that will impress them because you're demonstrating your ability to adult. So I think, answering questions. I just want to have a quick look through this because I'm conscious that we've got 5 minutes left to go. Remember how I said save a copy of everything? This is where that becomes really important, because in preparing for the interview, you want to have a read of all of those things again to remind yourself of the relevant skills, abilities, strengths, etc. that you've got, and what you've already told them, so that you can think about whether you need to reaffirm things you've said already, or whether you'd like to take the opportunity to introduce new information. It is okay to take your time. As I've said, take a sip of water, all of those sorts of things, absolutely okay to do that. And don't over-exaggerate. New Zealand's too small. We all know each other, or we know someone who knows someone. So if you over-exaggerate, it'll get found out. But also be mindful of, we have this tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand, which makes us all feel really awkward and uncomfortable with trying to sell ourselves. But this is where reflecting on yourself, as Michelle and Julia talked about, is really meaningful, because it can help you find evidence so that you're not just making stuff. You're not just saying, I'm great and I know it. You're saying, well, I'm really good at this thing, and I know that because I did it here and I had some really good feedback from somebody, or I got a good grade, or whatever it might be. Again, be yourself, and in interviews, use the STAR technique. If you're not familiar with the STAR technique, Google it, or go to your careers centre to find out more about it. And I'm going to wrap it up there, because now we've got 3 minutes left and I know that there's lots of questions.
Thanks, Nell. So yeah, we said we were going to play the hits for you, and there you have it. And I think just to stretch that musical analogy, we have a very short encore time here, and we do want to be mindful of everyone's time. So we won't be able to get to all of these questions. It does make me think that maybe the next one of these webinars could perhaps be a pure Q&A session. But what I would like to do is just, I guess, cherry pick a couple of these questions that might travel well across the largest number of students. But before I put those questions out, Sander, I was just wondering, is there somewhere that students could perhaps reach out centrally with those questions, and then we could maybe collectively answer and respond?
Yes, definitely. Those who registered got my email address in the email they received when they registered. So feel free to send questions to me, and I will forward those to our speakers, and they will reply to you.
Thanks, Sander. And a number of the questions were in regards to follow-up and getting access to the recording. So if you could follow Sander's instructions in regards to that. We do have a couple of minutes though, so we'd just like to pick a couple of questions here. Specifically, this might be one for the careers consultants. I might pass this over to you, Michelle and Julia. This is around PhD students and how they can reflect the value, offer expertise on the table for these graduate roles. So they're not considered overqualified or over-competitive, as I've seen mostly recruiters mention the bachelor and master's students for this grad role. So any thoughts or advice there for PhD?
I think for me, very briefly first, I think we would often be like, if you're going for a more maybe commercial kind of role, but you've just come off the back of a heavyweight PhD in something really specific, we would always encourage a real strengths-based CV and really highlighting those interpersonal skills quite high up in the CV. You're going to include your PhD still, and you're going to include your topic and other things that you've done. You're going to include conferences you've spoken at or publications. All that sort of stuff is going to be in there. But from a more commercial CV, you're really going to be trying to package those strengths up nice and high, I would say. You don't want to underplay your achievement, but you don't want to be discarded because people think that you're just too high for a grade role. You got anything to add to that, Michelle?
No, that's good.
Yeah. Quick answer.
Awesome. This is a question, the answer to which may vary university to university. I'm not completely sure, but it's, do we still have access to Career Hub and career consultant appointments after graduation?
You have access for about a couple of years after you graduate.
It's the same at all universities. I think 2 or 3 years access, it continues. It's really important to universities and career services that you are supported in your transition from being in the study environment to whatever you want to do next. So you have full access to online platforms as well as seeing careers advisors for 2 to 3 years post completion.
And I would just add that if you do have any difficulty post-graduation accessing any of those online services, whether that be the Careers Centre or the jobs platform, do just send an email to the Central Careers Service for any of the university in question, as I'm sure they will be able to help you. And there was another question here. I guess this is probably going to need to be the last one, because I'm just mindful that a lot of students might need to get off for 1:30 lectures. What are the chances you'll get hired if your academic transcript is B's or C's? Any thoughts on this one?
I would say that what I hear a lot from employers is that they are looking for a holistic picture. Employers in New Zealand, they know that they are recruiting a human being. They're not recruiting a qualification. So yes, it's great if you've got good grades, but it's not going to rule you out if you don't. Because to some people, B's are a really good grade.
I think it's only graduate program employers that generally request or require an academic transcript. Yeah. Outside of that, the majority of employers will never ask you for your transcript. They may not even ask you much about your qualification. They'll just go, great, you've got a qualification, or I'm familiar with that, or I'm not. And that's it. So just remember that actually the majority of students get B's and C's. That's normal. That's perfectly acceptable. They're looking for the whole person, okay? Not just your grades. They want to know everything about you and your capacity to go forward into their environment. So if you're going for a graduate program, yes, produce one. Other than that, you probably don't need to worry.
Another really useful thing, and I think this might sort of segue into closing statements a little bit here, is two very important words that are used a lot in recruitment circles and in the graduate recruitment space: career narrative. The idea of being able to create and curate a career narrative, a storytelling is more important than it ever has been. And I would link this to the question about PhD, being able to talk about the problem that your research is solving and who are the people affected by that, and building those networks in the community that is being serviced by that. But also the topic of AI, which is a huge kettle of fish to get into. But what we hear again is one of the areas where we would recommend caution when it comes to use of AI is removing you from the personal statement. It's not even a question of plagiarism or academic integrity, although that is obviously part of the conversation. It's this idea that they want to see you. They want this holistic view, to use a term that was used a moment ago. And one of the ways that we hear that frequently mentioned is in the idea of a career narrative, storytelling, illustrating your career path. But I would just like to thank Nell, Michelle and Julia and all of you students for turning out on this this afternoon. And I would again just encourage you to look at your local jobs board. NZUni Talent is the branding that you will see across all of the New Zealand universities in regards to that. And do keep in mind that these are organisations that are specifically looking for you and the area of study that you are engaged with. And I would also remind you to reach out to Sander if you have any additional questions that we haven't had an opportunity to do this, and also keep an eye on your email as well, because we will reach out to you again about any future content. So before we wrap up, Sander, Michelle, Julia, Nell, any closing thoughts or anything else you wanted to add?
Just don't hesitate to head along to your local careers team and get your questions answered. We're all really happy to help.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for your participation and your generosity of time. And thank you to all the students who attended, and particularly those who asked questions. So thanks again and have a great rest of the day.